The sun blazed mercilessly over Houston's towering glass skyscrapers, reflecting a brilliant early summer sky that seemed to hum with possibility. Yet inside Highland Crest Bank, the air was icy, laced with the sharp scent of espresso, the faint musk of new leather from designer sofas, a whisper of chair polish, and the barest trace of expensive perfume. Vivian Carter, a black woman who'd clawed her way to the top as CEO of a financial consulting firm, strode through the automatic glass doors with her head held high. Her heels clicked with unyielding purpose on the stone sidewalk outside, each step a testament to her pride, her resilience, her hard-won success. Why should she have to prove herself again? Why, in 2025, did the weight of her skin color still press down on her like an unspoken accusation? The lobby of Highland Crest was a cathedral of power. Crystal chandeliers cast a cold, distant glow, their prisms scattering light across dark wood panels and lush potted plants framing expansive windows. It was majestic, sure, but unwelcoming, like a palace where outsiders were tolerated but never truly invited. Vivian's caramel brown suit was impeccable, her matte black heels polished to perfection, her curly hair framing her face with quiet defiance. Yet the moment she stepped inside, she felt it, the subtle shift in the air, the unspoken rules that screamed, "Know your place." The steady tap of leather shoes on marble, the murmur of crisp shirt employees hunched over iPads, the confident hum of wealth. It all pulsed with an energy that seemed to exclude her. At the reception desk, Melissa Stone, with her blonde hair pulled back and nude lipstick accentuating her polished professionalism, offered a smile so empty it could have been carved from ice. Her eyes flicked over Vivian, her hair, her suit, her very presence, in a practiced, split-second judgment. "Welcome to Highland Crest. Do you have an appointment?" Melissa's voice was polite, but the indifference in her tone cut like a blade. Vivian placed her leather handbag on the counter, returning a smile that masked the sting. "I'm Vivian Carter. I have an appointment with Mr. Marcus Kramer at 11 o'clock. Couldn't they see she belonged here just as much as anyone else?" Melissa tapped her keyboard, her nod so slight it barely registered. "Yes, your name's here. Please take a seat. Mr. Kramer will see you shortly." No warmth, no offer of water, no trace of the courtesy Vivian expected from a high-stakes meeting like this. Just a curt gesture toward the waiting area before Melissa's eyes snapped back to her monitor, dismissing Vivian as if she were a minor inconvenience. Vivian drew a steady breath, swallowing the flicker of disappointment that threatened to flare into something more. How many times had she faced this? How many rooms had she walked into, only to be met with this same cold, calculated indifference? She moved to a leather bench by a floor-to-ceiling window, the early summer sun slanting through and painting sharp patterns across the polished stone floor. Outside, Houston buzzed with life, cars honking, pedestrians weaving through the heat. Inside, time seemed to freeze, trapped in a bubble of controlled silence where every movement was watched, every glance measured. Vivian set her handbag down softly, her eyes scanning the lobby. Clusters of people chatted softly. Men in impeccable suits with perfectly knotted ties, women with sleek hair and expensive wristwatches, their laughter and hush talk of stocks and multi-million-dollar deals weaving a tapestry of insider privilege. Did they even notice her sitting there? Or was she already invisible? Vivian glanced at her watch, 10:45. Always early, always prepared, she prided herself on it. In a world that scrutinized every detail of a black woman's presence, punctuality was her armor, her proof of professionalism. But as the minutes ticked by, 11 o'clock, 11:05, 11:15, 11:30, the sunlight crept farther across the floor, a cruel reminder that time waited for no one, not even her. No one called her name. No one offered an update. Melissa, perched at her desk like a gatekeeper, occasionally glanced her way with a blank, unreadable expression that felt like a slap. Was this deliberate? Was this how they kept people like her in their place? Each time footsteps echoed through the lobby, Vivian's heart leapt. Maybe now? But no. Each visitor was waved past, ushered into the inner sanctum while she remained rooted to her seat. A middle-aged white man in a gray suit breezed in, and Melissa's face lit up with a warm smile. Within seconds, he was escorted inside, no questions asked. Then a blonde woman in a designer dress, Prada bag swinging, was greeted with syrupy courtesy and whisked away without a pause. Two young men, joking like they owned the place, barely signed the registry before disappearing into the offices. A blonde couple laughed with Melissa, then vanished just as quickly. Why did they get to glide through while she was left to wait? Why was her time less valuable? The privileges on display were impossible to ignore, each one a tiny cut to Vivian's resolve. She'd faced this before, waits that stretched too long, polite indifference that masked something uglier. But today, surrounded by people who looked nothing like her, the sting was sharper. Her chest tightened, anger and pain twisting together like a storm brewing inside her. The sun outside blazed on, but inside Highland Crest, the light only illuminated the divide between those who belonged and those who were forced to prove it. Every glance, every empty smile, every moment of Melissa's cold efficiency. It wasn't personal. It was systemic, a machine that sorted clients by first impressions, by skin, by unspoken hierarchies. Vivian tightened her grip on her bag strap, sitting up straighter, her gaze steady. She wouldn't let them see her falter. A sigh, a slouch. Here, even the smallest gesture could be read as weakness. But deep inside, something fierce was stirring. Why should she accept this? Why should she let their rules diminish her? She'd built her empire on grit and precision, on knowing when to push back. Today, she decided her silence wouldn't make her invisible. It would make her undeniable. The minutes dragged on, each one heavier than the last. Time in Highland Crest moved differently, like a thick, viscous liquid pooling around her thoughts. Outside, the summer sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the sidewalk. Inside, the air stayed so cold it threatened to freeze her emotions solid. Vivian bit her lip, forcing herself to swallow the discomfort that clawed at her. She'd learned to keep her cool in halls of power, but this chill was different. Hollow, robotic, a politeness that was sweet on the surface but empty at its core. It was authority disguised as courtesy, a silent reminder of who held the reins. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. Vivian stood, her heels clicking sharply on the marble as she crossed the lobby. Heads turned, some surprised, some disdainful, as if she'd dared to break an unwritten rule. "Excuse me," she said, her voice even but firm, though her heart pounded like a drum. "Has Mr. Marcus Kramer been informed that I'm still waiting?" Melissa didn't look up, her fingers dancing over the keyboard as if Vivian's presence was a minor distraction. "He's in a meeting, and we'll see you shortly," she replied, her tone clipped, her eyes glued to the screen. Vivian's jaw tightened. "Could you give me a more specific estimate?" she pressed, her voice steady but insistent. She'd learned long ago that vague promises in places like this were worthless. Melissa shrugged, still not meeting her gaze. "I'm not sure. It shouldn't be long." For words, tossed out like crumbs, but they hit Vivian like a punch. A dismissal wrapped in politeness, a clear message. You're not important enough to matter. Did they think she wouldn't notice? Did they think she'd just sit quietly and take it? Melissa's tone wasn't a mistake. It was the product of a system trained to filter clients through invisible criteria, to draw lines with smiles and bury importance in a fog of procedure. Vivian stood there, searching Melissa's face for a flicker of empathy, but found only a wall of cold indifference. Returning to her seat, she felt the weight of it all. The weight, the glances, the unspoken rules, stretching her thin, as if the longer she stayed patient, the smaller she became. But something inside her snapped into focus. No more. She wouldn't be a polite victim, trapped in their game of exclusion. Her calm exterior held, but her eyes burned with a fire that refused to be dimmed. The weight stretched on, each second a test of her resolve. The lobby's opulence, the crystal prisms, the amber light, the soft hum of privilege, felt like a stage designed to make her feel small. But Vivian Carter was not small. She was a force, a woman who'd built her career on defying expectations, on turning every no into a watch me. And now, as the boardroom doors finally swung open, everything shifted. The branch manager, Marcus Kramer, froze, his confident facade cracking the moment the board members entered, their presence exposing the real power in the room. His eyes darted to Vivian, and for the first time, she saw it. Confusion, panic, the realization that the woman he'd kept waiting for nearly 2 hours was the one person he couldn't afford to ignore. This wasn't just about a loan agreement. It was about respect, about dismantling a system that thought it could sideline her with polite indifference. Vivian's gaze held steady, her silence no longer a sign of submission, but a weapon of defiance. She'd waited, yes, but she hadn't withered. She'd watched, learned, and now she was ready to demand what was hers. The board member's arrival was the spark, but Vivian was the fire. And as Marcus Kramer's expression shifted, flustered, exposed, she knew this moment was hers to claim. Why should she wait any longer? Why should she let their rules define her worth? The lobby of Highland Crest Bank buzzed with an undercurrent of privilege, but for Vivian Carter, it was a cold, suffocating stage where she'd been cast as an outsider. Why did it always feel like this? Why, after all her achievements, did she still have to fight to be seen? A middle-aged woman swept into the space, her golden hair cascading in soft waves, her porcelain skin glowing under the chandelier's icy light. Her navy velvet sheath dress hugged her frame perfectly, a cream-colored Chanel bag draped elegantly over her elbow. Her voice, lilting with the refinement of high society, carried through the lobby as she chatted on her phone, radiating ease and entitlement. The room seemed to tilt in her favor, the air growing just a touch livelier, as if her presence alone demanded attention. Who was she to command such reverence? Melissa Stone, the receptionist who'd treated Vivian with frosty indifference, transformed in an instant. Gone was the curt, dismissive tone. Now, her posture snapped upright, her voice brimming with warmth, as if greeting a long-lost friend. "Good morning, Mrs. Lancaster," she chirped, her smile so bright it could have lit up the entire lobby. The space seemed to pause. Conversations hushed, heads turned, fleeting looks of admiration and envy flickering toward the blonde woman. Barbara Lancaster barely acknowledged the fuss, offering a regal nod as she continued her call, her confidence unshakable. Why did some people glide through life so effortlessly while others, like Vivian, were left to wait? Within seconds, a young male staffer materialized at Mrs. Lancaster's side, his smile dripping with courtesy. "Please, Mrs. Lancaster, the boardroom is ready. Mr. Matthews is waiting." She thanked him with a gracious tilt of her head, flashed Melissa a smile that sparkled with privilege, and glided past security into the VIP corridor, her heels barely touching the marble. No one asked for her ID. No one checked for an appointment. No guest book signature was required. Doors swung open as if by magic, parting just for her. Vivian watched, her heart sinking like a stone in icy water. Was this what power looked like? Was this the world she'd never be allowed to enter? The contrast hit her like a slap. She glanced at her own leather chair, alone under a strip of sunlight that cast a long, lonely shadow across the polished floor. She felt reduced to nothing, an extra in a performance where the starring roles were reserved for others. Melissa's demeanor had flipped so completely it was jarring. Moments ago, she'd dismissed Vivian with a curt, "He'll see you shortly." "I'm not sure. Shouldn't be long." Now, she was all warmth and eagerness, straightening papers, tilting her head just so, practically glowing with the desire to please Mrs. Lancaster. Why was it so easy for some? Why did Vivian's presence seem to warrant nothing but cold efficiency? A surge of anger bubbled in Vivian's chest, mingling with humiliation and a helplessness she thought she'd buried long ago. Would everything change if she had lighter skin, a designer bag, a different hairstyle? The thought clawed at her, raw and painful. This wasn't just favoritism. It was a system, a silent barrier that millions like her faced every day, upheld by polite smiles and empty promises. She exhaled softly, but her eyes sparked with a new fire. No more silence. Not today. She wouldn't let this moment slip away, wouldn't let herself be erased by their rules. Vivian glanced at her watch, 12:05. Half the morning gone. Outside, Houston pulsed with life. Cars weaving through the heat, pedestrians dodging the midday sun. But inside Highland Crest, time was frozen. The lobby is sterile bubble, where the crisp blast of air conditioning and the distant murmur of contracts and stocks felt orchestrated for someone else. The waiting area was now empty, save for Vivian. The gray-suited men, the designer-dressed women, the special clients, they'd all been ushered in or had long since left. Only she remained, trapped in a silence so oppressive it felt like it could choke her. Why was she still here? Why was her time worth so little? Her senses sharpened in the hush. The precise click of high heels on marble, the soft scrape of leather chairs at teller stations, the faint hum of keyboards, it all echoed in her ears. Then, a snippet of conversation cut through the quiet, sharp and unmistakable. For Mrs. Lancaster, it's always an exception, a young female employee said behind Melissa's desk, her tone half joking, half serious. A deeper male voice replied, laced with irony. Who can blame them? Anyone with her profile would be top priority at any bank. Laughter followed, then stopped abruptly as they realized Vivian was still there, her presence undeniable. She turned slowly, her gaze locking onto theirs, but they looked away, pretending nothing had been said. Did they think she wouldn't hear? Did they think she wouldn't understand? She didn't need their confirmation. The rules here weren't written on appointment slips or plastered on the customer-first signs dotting the lobby. They were in the nods, the smiles, the soft power of indifference and selective courtesy. Melissa, now back in her role as the impassive gatekeeper, sat upright, her fingers gliding over the keyboard, her eyes tracking the passing designer suits with calculated appraisal. When they flicked to Vivian, they were empty, no embarrassment, no remorse, just the practiced look of someone trained to make others feel they didn't belong. How could they be so blatant? How could they dismiss her so easily? The anger in Vivian's chest grew hotter, tangled with humiliation, shame, and a bitterness she thought she'd outgrown. Memories of her childhood in rural Texas flooded back. The weary stares, the whispers, her mother's voice ringing clear. If you want respect, you'll need twice the effort, 3 times the patience, and 10 times the courage. But today, Vivian realized effort and patience weren't enough. Some systems were built to deny her fairness, no matter how hard she tried. The discrimination here wasn't loud or overt. It was a silent force, powered by polite neglect and the selective elevation of clients like Mrs. Lancaster. Why should she keep playing by their rules? Why should she let their indifference define her? Trapped in that suffocating silence, Vivian felt the weight of it all, the glances, the delays, the unspoken hierarchies, threatening to make her believe she didn't deserve better. But a surge of righteous fury ignited within her, burning away the doubt. She caught her reflection in the glossy floor, her suit sleeves slightly wrinkled, her lips dry, her eyes weary after nearly 2 hours of being invisible. Yet every nerve in her body crackled with resolve, not just for herself, but for every person who'd been sidelined by courteous hands, by cold suits, by the complicity of those who saw injustice and looked away. She wouldn't let this go. Not today. Vivian inhaled deeply, sitting taller, as if pushing back against the invisible weight of the entire lobby. Her eyes no longer held endurance. They blazed with determination. She wouldn't walk away, another scar on her dignity. She wouldn't let Melissa smile at the next Barbara Lancaster while she faded into the background. Glancing at her phone, no texts, no alerts from the bank. It was as if she'd been erased from their system entirely. Outrage surged through her. Enough. It was time to break the silence. The lobby's opulence, the classical paintings, the meticulously trimmed plants, the faces lifting and dropping like actors in a play, screamed that true power belonged to a select few. Everyone else was just a shadow, waiting, hoping, sometimes giving up. But Vivian wasn't born to give up. Every fiber of her being came alive, electric with purpose. She rose to her feet, straightened her blazer, and took decisive steps toward the reception desk. Her gaze locked on Melissa, the personification of indifferent authority. The ambient sounds of the lobby seemed to hush, leaving only the echo of her heels, each step matching the fierce beat of her heart. Whispers stopped, eyes turned, everyone waiting to see what she'd do next. Could they feel the shift? Could they sense the storm coming? Vivian didn't stop at the desk this time. She strode toward the corridor leading to the management offices, the frosted glass door looming like a fortress wall, a boundary of power designed to keep people like her out. But today, she refused to be held back by old wounds or unspoken rules. Each step was a declaration. I am here, and I belong. Melissa's face flickered with genuine surprise, her usual indifference cracking. Excuse me, you can't go in there, she called, but her words trailed off, weak against Vivian's resolve. Vivian tilted her head, flashing a quick, unyielding look. Routine refusals wouldn't stop her today. The glass door swung open, revealing a quiet expanse of dark wood-paneled walls that absorbed the light, a gray-carpeted corridor stretching into the distance. Brass nameplates gleamed under the soft yellow glow of recessed lighting, and the only sound was the air conditioner's low hum, like a sigh echoing her own. How many times had she been shuffled through side entrances, told to wait just a moment, relegated to small rooms far from the center of power? Too many. But not today. A thrill of defiance mixed with trepidation surged through her. Sometimes, to break a system, you have to break its rules first. At the end of the hall, a polished nameplate read Marcus Kramer, branch manager. Vivian paused, smoothed her blazer's collar, and drew a steady breath. She knocked. Not too hard, not too soft, just enough to say, I'm here and I deserve to be. Inside, Marcus Kramer looked up, his steely blue-gray eyes catching the glow of his laptop screen. His dark navy suit was crisp, his salt and pepper hair immaculately styled, his posture that of a man who controlled every detail of his domain. Surprise, tinged with annoyance, flashed across his face. Clearly, he wasn't used to someone walking in uninvited. Who did she think she was? Vivian entered deliberately, closing the door behind her, her eyes never leaving his. In that moment, two worlds collided. The gatekeeper of a system built on exclusion, and a woman who'd spent her life fighting to be seen, refusing to play the role of the overlooked. Kramer slid his hand off the keyboard, lifting his head, his voice measured but laced with irritation. Miss Carter, I don't think you should have entered uninvited. But Vivian stood tall, her presence a challenge, her silence a demand. Did he really think she'd wait forever? Did he think she'd let his system erase her? The air in Marcus Kramer's office was thick with tension, the kind that makes your skin prickle and your heart pound. Vivian Carter stood tall, her gaze locked on the branch manager, her voice firm and unwavering, cutting through the sterile hum of the air conditioner. I've been waiting far too long, Mr. Kramer. I believe I have the same right as any other client to meet you at our scheduled time. Why should she have to beg for what was rightfully hers? Why, after nearly 2 hours of being sidelined, did she still have to fight for a seat at the table? Marcus's brow furrowed, his fingers fumbling through papers on his desk, as if searching for an excuse to deflect her intensity. My schedule today is very tight. If you can be patient a bit longer, his voice trailed off, weak and unconvincing. Vivian wasn't having it. She cut him off, her words sharp and deliberate. I've been patient over an hour and a half. Each syllable landed like a hammer, not a complaint but a declaration, a reminder that every minute she'd been forced to wait was a wound to her dignity, a dignity she'd spent years building, brick by brick, in a world that too often tried to tear down. Did he even understand the weight of that weight? Could he feel the sting of being made invisible? In that moment, the room seemed to freeze. The air conditioner's hum faded, the overhead lights dimmed, and Marcus's rehearsed justifications crumbled into silence. He met her gaze, and for the first time, he saw not a plea but an unyielding will, a force that refused to be dismissed. "All right, Miss Carter," he said, swallowing a sigh, his composure slipping like sand through his fingers. "Please have a seat." But Vivian didn't sit because he allowed it. She claimed the chair across from him, her briefcase landing on the desk with a quiet thud, her files spread out like a battle map. This was her space now, not his. She'd shattered a rule, rewritten the playbook, and demanded her right to be seen. Wasn't that what this was all about? Wasn't this about more than just a loan? Her eyes never left Marcus, pinning him in place. She wasn't just here for herself. She carried the weight of every person too timid to cross the frosted glass threshold, every voice silenced by polite neglect. But how would Marcus, the embodiment of this institution's deep-rooted power, respond? Would he dodge the truth with smooth apologies? Would he cling to the veneer of fairness to mask the discrimination she'd endured? Or would he, just for a moment, let the system's flaws show? The silence stretched, heavy and charged, marking the boundary between exclusion and self-determination. Outside, the Houston sun slid westward, casting long shadows across the city. But inside, a battle was just beginning. Could he feel it? Could he sense the shift? Marcus's voice broke the hush, clipped and defensive, his eyes glinting with irritation behind gold-rimmed glasses. "Miss Carter, you were supposed to wait until I called you." Each word was a verdict, a reminder of the unspoken rules that governed this place, rules that demanded her silence, her patience, her compliance. It was as if her very presence challenged the sacred protocol of Highland Crest's secret priority lists. But Vivian wasn't here to play by those rules. Her reply was icy, measured, and razor-sharp. "I've waited for over an hour and a half." 7 syllables, slicing through the room's polite facade, exposing a truth Marcus had either ignored or refused to see. She wasn't begging. She was demanding answers. Why was her time less valuable? Why was she forced to wait while others waltzed in? Marcus looked flustered, his hand resting on the stack of files like a lifeline, his composure fraying at the edges. "I sincerely apologize for the wait," he said, his voice straining to sound authoritative. "But today we are extremely busy. There's a constant flow of clients, several VIPs, urgent appointments." His excuses were flimsy, a house of cards waiting to collapse. Vivian didn't let him hide. "I'm a client, too. I had an appointment. Yet I've watched at least 5 others, some without appointments, be ushered in ahead of me. Why?" Her question hung in the air, heavy and unyielding, a challenge he couldn't ignore. The room fell silent, the soft yellow light casting shadows that highlighted the crow's feet at the corners of Marcus's eyes. Lines carved not just by age, but by every time he'd sidestepped questions of fairness. Did he think she wouldn't notice? Did he think she'd let it slide? He looked away, his tone softening, almost distant, as if addressing a ghost rather than the woman before him. There must be some confusion. Sometimes procedures overlap. Reception follows separate directives for VIPs or special cases arise. I assure you there's no intent to discriminate. But his words rang hollow, and Vivian saw the unease flicker in his eyes. She pressed harder, her voice cutting through his deflections. Or is it a choice? 3 words, simple but devastating, silencing every feeble excuse he'd offered. It wasn't just a question. It was an accusation, a mirror held up to the system's flaws. Could he deny it? Could he face the truth, staring him down? Marcus swallowed hard, his gaze darting toward the hallway as if hoping for rescue, but no one was coming. No receptionist, no email system, no procedural shield, just him and the raw truth Vivian had laid bare. He tried to rally, his voice grasping for confidence. "We never intend to exclude anyone here. Miss Carter, we evaluate clients based on their profile, financial capacity, and credit history. Those admitted first are typically priority cases per internal policy or direct instructions from higher-ups. It's necessary flexibility for a large organization." But his words sounded rehearsed, a script he'd recited too many times. Vivian leaned forward, her voice sharp as a blade. "And that flexibility Is it reserved only for those who fit a certain mold? For those you feel belong? Or, to put it bluntly, to quietly exclude those who don't? Her words stripped away the polite veneer, exposing the system's naked operation. Marcus's fingers tightened, his knuckles whitening, a silent admission of discomfort. Did he realize how transparent he was? Did he see the cracks in his own defenses? The air grew thick, the dark wood paneling and pale glow of the overhead lights powerless against the weight of her words. The laptop's dim screen flickered, but it couldn't hide the truth. Prejudice and discrimination laid bare in the room's silence. Marcus tried to pivot, his voice clinging to business. Anyway, I've reviewed your application. Impressive. Sound finances, a clear business plan. However, policy has tightened recently. Vivian cut him off, her voice rising with unshakable resolve. Don't evaluate me on my file. I built my company from the ground up. I know my worth. What I want to know, Mr. Kramer, is why this same system enforces two entirely different standards. Why do people like me, prepared, scheduled, fully qualified, have to wait while others get priority without explanation? Her voice echoed, no longer bound by courtesy, a cry for justice that refused to be silenced. Wasn't this the heart of it? Wasn't this about the invisible barriers she'd faced her entire life? Marcus sank back in his chair, his expression darkening, the weight of her words pressing down on him. He knew every word he uttered now could either expose him further or salvage the last shred of his so-called fair process. The room was motionless, but a boundary had been crossed, not just between them, but between enduring and demanding the truth. For the first time that day, Marcus felt it. He wasn't setting the rules anymore. Vivian Carter was. Her presence was a force, a challenge to the system he represented, and she wasn't backing down. How could he respond? How could he justify a system that had failed her so blatantly? The tension thickened as Vivian's question lingered, a blade suspended in the air. Marcus straightened, his eyes fixed on the stack of files, desperately grasping for the authority slipping through his fingers. There is no discrimination here, Miss Carter, he said, his voice striving for certainty but betraying a slight tremor, as if he were reassuring himself more than her. It was a line he'd rehearsed countless times, in trainings to auditors in polished statements. But today, it crumbled under the weight of Vivian's gaze. Did he really believe his own words? Did he think she'd accept such a flimsy defense? Vivian sat tall, her hands clasped neatly, her eyes unblinking. I've seen this routine in many places, Mr. Kramer, she said, her voice clear and razor-sharp. Polite but exclusive. On the surface, you call me a client, a partner, but in practice, you've sidelined me with endless waiting, half-hearted apologies, and special exceptions granted only to the right kind of people. You call it waiting, but in reality, it's an indirect refusal. Her words were a fire, burning through his excuses, exposing the truth he'd tried to bury. Marcus's face flushed, his practice calm cracking under the weight of genuine embarrassment. His fingertips drummed on the desk, each tap a nervous confession. Could he feel the walls closing in? Could he see the system's flaws laid bare? His voice came out rushed, almost breaking. Would you like to discuss your loan? The pivot to business was desperate, a last-ditch effort to dodge the real issue. That power here wasn't for everyone, only for those the system deemed worthy. But Vivian wasn't distracted. She nodded once, not in concession, but as a step deeper into the fight. We will talk about the loan. But before we discuss numbers, I want you to face this reality. Those who were ushered in before me this morning, what set them apart beyond being white, familiar clients fitting your definition of belonging? Her question was a blade, cutting through his defenses. Marcus's hands clenched, his breath shallow, his composure unraveling. He had no rebuttal, no way to hide from the truth staring him down. Did he see it now? Did he understand the weight of his own choices? He tried to deflect, his voice weak. We follow a standard client intake process. Sometimes VIPs or directives from headquarters. But Vivian cut him off, her voice steady but charged with righteous anger. How many times have I heard VIP, client? headquarters directives? It's always a screen for special cases that serve only a select group, while I, qualified by every criterion, remain the exception, the one who waits, who must remind herself to be patient until she becomes invisible. The air thickened, Marcus's gaze dropping to the desk, his fingers fumbling with the files as if they could shield him. "You're mistaken," he mumbled. "Here we assess clients on many factors." But his words were hollow, a crumbling facade. Vivian leaned back, unwavering. "I'm not mistaken. Not just at this bank, but at every institution I've walked into. You operate by unspoken rules, claiming everyone is equal while quietly sidelining people like me, hoping they'll stay patient enough to wait, weary enough to give up, polite enough to stay silent." Her voice was a clarion call, a refusal to be marginalized any longer. Could he hear it? Could he feel the power shifting? The room fell silent, the clock's second hand ticking like a heartbeat. No keyboard clicks, no confident banker's tone, just the raw truth, undeniable and exposed. Marcus's hands shook slightly, the hush stretching until it felt like the walls themselves were holding their breath. He tried to reclaim control, his voice grasping for normalcy. "At any rate, your loan application is strong. If you need anything else to finalize it, I'm here to help." But Vivian's gaze was equal parts pity and steel, a reminder that she wasn't here just for a loan. She was here to reclaim fairness, to dismantle a system that eroded dignity with every hour of waiting. And that taught silence. Every excuse fell flat, and Vivian Carter stood as the unyielding force demanding change. Was this the moment the system would finally bend? Was this the day her voice would be heard? The air in Marcus Kramer's office crackled with tension, heavy with the weight of truth laid bare. Vivian Carter stood resolute, her gaze piercing through the branch manager's defenses, her voice steady and unyielding. "I've been waiting far too long, Mr. Kramer. I believe I have the same right as any other client to meet you at our scheduled time. Why should she have to fight for what was hers? Why, after nearly 2 hours of being sidelined, did she still have to demand respect in a place that claimed fairness?" Marcus's brow furrowed, his fingers fumbling through papers on his desk, searching for an excuse to deflect her fire. "My schedule today is very tight. If you can be patient a bit longer," his voice wavered, a flimsy shield against her resolve. Vivian cut him off, her words sharp as a blade. "I've been patient over an hour and a half." Each syllable was a strike, not a plea but a demand, a reminder that every minute she'd been forced to wait was a deliberate wound to her dignity, a dignity she'd forged through years of battling a world that too often dismissed her. Did he even grasp the cost of that weight? Could he feel the sting of her erasure? The room seemed to freeze, the air conditioner's hum fading, the overhead lights dimming, Marcus's rehearsed excuses crumbling into silence. He met her gaze and saw not a supplicant but a force, an unyielding will that refused to be ignored. "All right, Miss Carter," he said, swallowing hard, his composure slipping like sand through his fingers. "Please have a seat." But Vivian didn't sit because he permitted it. She claimed the chair across from him, her briefcase hitting the desk with a quiet thud, her files spread out like a declaration of war. This was her space now. Hadn't she earned it? Wasn't this moment hers to seize? Her eyes never left Marcus, pinning him in place. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She carried the weight of countless others, those too timid to cross the frosted glass threshold, those silenced by polite neglect. But how would Marcus, the embodiment of this bank's entrenched power, respond? Would he dodge her accusations with smooth apologies? Would he cling to the facade of fairness to mask the discrimination she'd endured? Or would he, just for a moment, let the truth of the system's flaws show? The silence stretched, heavy and charged, a boundary between exclusion and self-determination. Outside, the Houston sun slid westward, casting long shadows across the city, but inside, a battle was raging. Could he feel the ground shifting? Could he sense the tide turning? Marcus's voice broke the hush, clipped and defensive, his eyes glinting with irritation behind gold-rimmed glasses. "Miss Carter, You were supposed to wait until I called you. Each word was a verdict, a reminder of the unspoken rules that demanded her compliance, her silence, her patience. It was as if her presence alone challenged the sacred protocols of Highland Crest's hidden priority lists. But Vivian wasn't here to play their game. Her reply was icy, measured, and devastating. I've waited for over an hour and a half. 7 syllables cut through the room's polite veneer, exposing a truth Marcus had either ignored or refused to see. She wasn't begging. She was demanding answers. Why was her time less valuable? Why was she forced to wait while others breezed through? Marcus looked flustered, his hand clutching the stack of files like a lifeline, his composure unraveling. I sincerely apologize for the wait, he said, his voice straining to sound authoritative. But today we are extremely busy. There's a constant flow of clients, several VIPs, urgent appointments. His excuses were flimsy, a house of cards ready to collapse. Vivian didn't let him hide. I'm a client too. I had an appointment. Yet I've watched at least 5 others, some without appointments, be ushered in ahead of me. Why? Her question hung in the air, a challenge he couldn't dodge. The soft yellow light cast shadows across Marcus's face, highlighting the crow's feet at his eyes, lines etched not just by age, but by every time he'd sidestepped questions of fairness. Did he think she wouldn't notice? Did he think she'd let it go? He looked away, his tones softening, almost distant, as if addressing a shadow rather than the woman before him. There must be some confusion. Sometimes procedures overlap. Reception follows separate directives for VIPs or special cases arise. I assure you there's no intent to discriminate. But his words rang hollow, and Vivian saw the unease flicker in his eyes. She pressed harder, her voice slicing through his deflections. Or is it a choice? 3 words, simple but shattering, silencing every weak excuse he'd offered. It wasn't just a question. It was an accusation, a mirror held up to the system's flaws. Could he deny it? Could he face the truth staring him down? Marcus swallowed hard, his gaze darting to the hallway, as if hoping for rescue. But no one was coming. No receptionist, no email system, no procedural shield. Just him and the raw truth Vivian had exposed. He tried to rally, his voice grasping for confidence. We never intend to exclude anyone here. Miss Carter, we evaluate clients based on their profile, financial capacity, and credit history. Those admitted first are typically priority cases per internal policy or direct instructions from higher-ups. It's necessary flexibility for a large organization. But his words were rehearsed, a tired script. Vivian leaned forward, her voice sharp as steel. And that flexibility, is it reserved only for those who fit a certain mold? For those you feel belong? Or to put it bluntly, to quietly exclude those who don't? Her words stripped away the polite facade, exposing the system's naked truth. Marcus's fingers tightened, knuckles whitening, a silent admission of discomfort. Did he see how transparent he was? Did he feel the cracks in his own defenses? The air grew thick, the darkwood paneling and pale glow of the overhead lights powerless against the weight of her words. The laptop's dim screen flickered, but it couldn't hide the truth. Prejudice and discrimination laid bare in the room's silence. Marcus tried to pivot, his voice clinging to business. Anyway, I've reviewed your application. Impressive. Sound finances, a clear business plan. However, policy has tightened recently. Vivian cut him off, her voice rising with unshakable resolve. Don't evaluate me on my file. I built my company from the ground up. I know my worth. What I want to know, Mr. Kramer, is why this same system enforces 2 entirely different standards. Why do people like me, prepared, scheduled, fully qualified, have to wait while others get priority without explanation? Her voice was a clarion call, a refusal to be marginalized. Wasn't this the heart of it? Wasn't this about the invisible barriers she'd faced her entire life? Marcus sank back in his chair, his expression darkening, the weight of her words pressing down on him. He knew every word he uttered now could either expose him further or salvage the last shred of his so-called fair process. The tension was pierced by the steady click of leather shoes on the carpeted hallway outside, a confident, measured pace that silenced the room. A clear, commanding voice rang out, decisive and self-assured, unmistakably belonging to someone who led with absolute authority. The door swung open, and 3 men entered, their high-end suits, dark ties, and polished shoes radiating power. At their head was Richard Langford, the CEO of Highland Crest Bank, a figure of success and quiet fear. His stern, experienced gaze surveyed the room, a king inspecting his empire. For Vivian, he was more than a CEO. He was a former collaborator, a partner on major projects with Carter Strategies. Did Marcus even know? Could he have imagined the connection? The moment Richard spotted Vivian, his face transformed, the stern mask giving way to a warm, surprised smile. He strode toward her, extending his hand as if Marcus didn't exist. "Vivian, I never expected to see you here. You're still running Carter Strategies, right?" His voice boomed with genuine respect, filling the room with recognition. Vivian returned his smile, rising to shake his hand with poised confidence. No longer the overlooked client, she was a formidable partner, once personally invited by Richard to advise on Highland Crest's largest digital transformation. "Yes, I'm still at the helm of Carter Strategies. It's wonderful to see you again, Richard." Her voice rang with strength, the smoldering indignation of moments ago, now a blazing confidence. Wasn't this the power of connection? Wasn't this the moment everything changed? Marcus stood behind them, his face paling, his composure crumbling into embarrassment. He'd never dreamed the client he'd sidelined would have a direct line to the CEO, let alone as a peer. He stammered, trying to interject. "Mr. Langford, I wasn't aware of that, Ms." But Richard raised a hand, silencing him without a glance, his gaze locked on Vivian. For Marcus, that gesture was a death knell, the end of every excuse. The 2 board members behind Richard nodded at Vivian's name, their faces showing clear respect. "Vivian, I thought you were on a business trip to New York. What brings you to the Houston branch today?" Richard asked, his tone warm but curious. Vivian faced him directly, her response candid yet tactful. "I had an appointment with Mr. Kramer to discuss a loan for a new project. Unfortunately, it ran longer than expected." Why should she soften the truth? Why should she let Marcus off the hook? Richard's smile vanished, his gaze turning steely as he faced Marcus. He knew exactly what had happened. Stories of flexible branches were all too familiar. Longer than expected, he repeated, each word sharp with scrutiny. "Exactly how long, Marcus?" Marcus broke into a sweat, his managerial poise shattered. "Sir, there were some complications. I take full responsibility. My schedule has been packed." But Richard cut him off, his voice cold. "No, I want to hear it from Vivian. How long?" Without hesitation, Vivian replied, "Over an hour and a half. I confirmed the appointment and arrived on time. Yet those who came in after me, some without appointments, were given priority." Her words landed like a gavel, undeniable and final. Could Marcus feel the weight of his mistake? Could he see the consequences unfolding? A heavy silence swept the room, chilling the air. Richard flicked a glance at the board members, their frowns mirroring his own. He sat down opposite Marcus, his presence compressing the space into one of truth and consequence. Marcus bowed his head, his hands clasped tightly, a man who just dug his own grave. Vivian was no longer the sidelined outsider. She was the voice everyone needed to hear, embodying every person dismissed by this system. The room froze, the hallway's sounds silenced by the presence of the bank's most powerful figures. Marcus's confusion was painfully obvious, his temples slick with sweat, his lips parched. His polished facade lay shattered, revealing a man caught between shame and panic. There was a scheduling mix-up, Mr. Langford. I instructed reception to confirm, but it seems..." Richard cut him off, his gaze ice cold. "How long did Miss Carter have to wait?" Vivian let the silence stretch, letting Marcus's discomfort settle into every corner. "Nearly an hour and a half," she said at last, her voice steady. One board member's frown deepened, a silent condemnation that carried more weight than words. Was this Marcus's reckoning? Was this the moment the system faced its flaws? Richard's anger flared, his knuckles pale as he clenched his hands on the desk. "Marcus, step outside. We'll discuss this later." Marcus froze, then bowed his head in forced deference. "Yes, Mr. Langford." He gathered his papers clumsily, casting Vivian a look of regret tinged with bitterness. A man who'd just realized his excuses were a cruel joke. The door slammed behind him, the sound slicing through the pretense he'd hidden behind. The atmosphere shifted. No more charades, just a cold reckoning. The board members stood at attention, their eyes on Vivian, seeing her as someone undeniable. Richard took a steadying breath, his sternness softening slightly. "I offer you my sincere apology, Vivian. This is entirely unacceptable at Highland Crest." Vivian nodded, her voice firm. "I'm not the only one who's been through this, Richard, and I believe one apology isn't nearly enough." Wasn't this about more than her? Wasn't this about every voice silenced by this system? Richard addressed the board members. "Please stay after this meeting. I want a full review of the client reception process at our Houston branch, and I expect a detailed report by week's end." The room grew heavy with seriousness, a power structure shaken by one woman's courage. Vivian settled back, the weight in her chest lifting. She'd done what few dared, forced the system to confront its truth, compelling those who hid behind masks to face their discrimination. Outside, Houston's sun blazed, but inside, a quiet storm had passed, leaving a heavy silence and changed gazes directed at Marcus, at Vivian, at Highland Crest itself. As the door closed behind Marcus, the atmosphere loosened, giving way to focused attention. Richard pulled out a chair and sat across from Vivian, the slight movement speaking volumes of his respect. The board members stepped forward, silent witnesses to a moment that could reshape the branch. Richard fixed his gaze on Vivian, his voice carrying regret and determination. "I want to offer you my sincere apology. What happened today is absolutely unacceptable at Highland Crest, and it should never happen to any client, especially you." He leaned forward, reading her expression. "I need to hear the entire account from start to finish. Not just Marcus's actions, but how reception treated you, who was given priority, everything. Was this the moment for real change? Was this the chance to dismantle the barriers she'd faced?" Vivian nodded, her voice calm and clear. For the first time that morning, she felt truly heard, not with polite lip service, but with the attention of someone ready to act. She recounted every detail. Melissa Stone's cold, appraising glance when she arrived, the mechanical responses, shortly, "I'm not sure. He's in a meeting," with no effort to explain, the clients who arrived after her. White men in gray suits, blonde women in designer dresses, ushered in with warm smiles. Barbara Lancaster's effortless glide through the VIP corridor. Marcus's indifferent shrugs and smooth excuses. Richard and the board members listened, their faces darkening with each instance of unwarranted coldness. Vivian's voice was steady, her resolve unshakable. She'd forced the truth into the open, and now the system had to answer. Could they ignore her now? Could they pretend this didn't matter? The room in Marcus Kramer's office at Highland Crest Bank was thick with the weight of exposed truths, truths that screamed these weren't just isolated mistakes, but deep, systemic flaws woven into the very fabric of the institution. Vivian Carter's voice, steady and resolute, cut through the heavy silence as she concluded her account. "I'm not asking for special treatment. I just want the same respect any other client receives, and I believe I'm not alone in this." Why should she have to beg for basic fairness? Why, after enduring hours of dismissal, does she still have to fight to be seen as equal? Richard Langford, the CEO, fell silent, his sharp gaze softening as he absorbed her words. He turned to the board members, his voice low but charged with conviction. "Do you hear that? We talk endlessly about diversity and inclusion, yet the reality is outdated rules enforced by exceptions and personal biases." His words were a wake-up call, a challenge to the system he led. Could they ignore this any longer? Could they pretend this wasn't their responsibility? Richard's eyes locked on Vivian, unwavering and intense. This will not end with an apology. I will take personal action regarding Marcus and anyone directly involved. But more profoundly, I want you to know your voice today has awakened this entire system. That fairness cannot remain only on paper. His promise was a spark, igniting hope in a room that had felt suffocating just moments before. One board member, his face etched with quiet admiration, added softly, "Thank you for speaking up. There are things internal reports or staff surveys never capture." Richard leaned toward Vivian, his grip tightening with resolve. "We will commission a full review involving our risk management and human resources teams. Meanwhile, I commit to approving your loan application and launching a comprehensive audit of client reception processes across all branches. If you need to meet with me directly anytime, I'm at your disposal." Was this the turning point? Was this the moment Highland Crest would finally change? Vivian met Richard's gaze, seeing not just a promise, but a genuine acknowledgement of her worth, a respect the system owed every client. For the first time that day, a lightness bloomed in her chest, not because of the loan, but because her voice had reached the right ears at the right time. She'd been heard, truly heard. Richard, in that moment, seemed to grasp that true power wasn't about picking who gets priority. It was about having the guts to confront and fix what's broken, even if it meant tearing down the mask that hid the system's flaws. The meeting room felt heavy, not with tension, but with the weight of responsibility now resting on its leader. Could he carry it? Could he turn words into action? Richard snapped into crisis management mode, his authority filling the space. He turned to a subordinate near the door, his voice sharp and decisive. "Where's Miss Carter's file? Bring it here." Within minutes, a thick dossier stamped Carter Strategies with the note, "Project Investment Loan," landed on the table. The room went silent, the board members and Vivian feeling the gravity of the moment. This wasn't just about a loan. It was about the branch's reputation, its future, its soul. Richard flipped open the file, his eyes scanning the pages with the precision of a seasoned executive, pausing on key financials. Every page held the weight of Vivian's hard work, her undeniable qualifications. Why had this been ignored? Why had she been made to wait? In under 10 minutes, Richard snapped the file shut, the sound echoing like a gavel. He looked at Vivian, then at the board members, his voice firm. "This file is impeccable. Every metric exceeds our standards. If we'd followed procedure, Miss Carter should have been approved from start. Let's expedite this. I want the approval email sent to her today." No one dared hesitate. A board member scribbled notes, firing off a message to the operations team. Vivian watched, her heart swelling as she witnessed real power in action. Not the indifferent stalling she'd endured, but speed, efficiency, and resolve. This was transparency, raw and rare, a glimpse of justice unfolding before her eyes. Wasn't this what she'd fought for? Wasn't this the system bending, just a little? Richard turned to the board members, his tone calm but unyielding. "I want a full audit of our client reception process at this branch. Everything from front desk procedures and appointment confirmations to special case handling and any exceptions over the past 3 months. Marcus Kramer is to be suspended pending an internal investigation. Report back to me with full findings this week." A board member hesitated, his voice cautious. "Mr. Langford, how severely will we hold Marcus accountable?" Richard didn't flinch. "That depends on the investigation. If there's evidence of discrimination or service standard violations, I will not tolerate any excuse. Highland Crest's reputation is built on client trust, not the personal power of individual managers." His words were a hammer, striking at the core of the bank's values. The room fell silent, each syllable a promise, not just to Vivian, but to every employee. There was no gray area for bias, no excuse for abuse of power. Could Marcus survive this? Could the system withstand such scrutiny? Richard's gaze returned to Vivian, warm yet resolute. "I know an apology can't erase the harm done, but I promise this will be a lesson, not just for Marcus, but for the entire system. I will personally send you a letter of apology and inform all senior managers at Highland Crest. This will not happen again." Vivian met his eyes, seeing not just the CEO's authority, but a genuine understanding of the systemic failure she'd exposed. She nodded slowly, accepting the commitment, though she knew change wouldn't come overnight. This was a start, a crack in the system's armor. Wasn't that enough for now? Wasn't her voice the spark that could ignite real reform? Richard stood, extending his hand. Not a perfunctory gesture, but a symbol of genuine commitment, proof of an organization's resolve to change. "Thank you for speaking up. Not everyone has the courage to make us face ourselves." Vivian squeezed his hand, feeling her dignity and strength surge back, not just for herself, but for every client diminished by cold courtesy. Outside, the afternoon sun dipped low, its golden light streaming through the windows, casting their joined hands in a glowing silhouette. On one side, a woman brave enough to demand justice. On the other, a leader strong enough to confront his institution's mistakes. The lights sparkled across the conference table, highlighting the magnitude of this moment, where a single voice had upended a system that once thought her insignificant. Could this be the beginning of something bigger? Could Vivian's courage reshape Highland Crest? Vivian stood, her face serene yet resolute, the fine lines at her eyes, etched by a morning of exhaustion, now softened by renewed conviction. She'd done the right thing, not just for herself, but for countless others. She looked at Richard, once the face of a rigid system, now a leader ready to act. "Mr. Langford, I know you're striving to make things right. I appreciate the commitments you've made, but you must understand, approving a loan and issuing an apology can't erase the experience of being demeaned, treated as if I weren't worthy, simply because I didn't fit the ideal profile some here assume." Her voice was firm, a reminder that the harm wasn't in numbers but in the quiet denial of her humanity. Did he truly get it? Could he see the depth of the wound? Richard fell silent, his expression revealing a rare introspection, an awareness that real harm came from moments when someone's worth was dismissed, by glances, by delays, by a system that quietly pushed people aside. After a moment, he spoke, his voice deeper, slower, weighted with sincerity. "Rest assured, Vivian, what you've shared today will not be dismissed as a minor incident and forgotten. I promise real change, change that goes to the root, not just the surface. We will retrain our staff, review every customer touchpoint, and build transparent processes so every person is treated fairly. No one should ever decide another's value based on bias or prejudice." His words were a vow, a commitment to dismantle the barriers Vivian had exposed. Could she trust it? Could this promise hold? Vivian nodded, her shoulders squared, her gaze steady. "Thank you, Richard. I only hope that next time someone's sitting out there in the lobby, in any Highland Crest seat, won't have to wait for a CEO to arrive before they're respected. Respect and fairness should begin at the front door and last until the moment each guest leaves, for everyone, whether their name is Carter, Lancaster, or anything else." Her words were a challenge, a vision of a world where equality wasn't an exception but a standard. The room fell into a profound silence, charged with the weight of her truth. The board members exchanged glances, acknowledging the rarity of this moment. A client whose courage had forced an entire organization to look inward. Was this the spark for lasting change? Was this Vivian's legacy? Richard stepped forward, his voice blending determination and humility. "I promise you, Vivian, I will personally oversee this transformation. No more token processes, no more perfunctory handshakes to smooth things over. We need people like you, those who dare to speak the truth and compel us to grow." Vivian met his gaze, seeing a deep empathy that united client and leader. That empathy, small but powerful, was worth more than any policy, a reminder that metrics and targets meant nothing without respect for every individual. In that moment, Vivian felt a profound relief, not for the loan, but because she'd become part of a shift from an exception forced to wait to a voice strong enough to hold power accountable. She smiled, a smile that said she was no longer alone. Could Highland Crest, rise to this challenge? Could her courage ripple beyond this room? The meeting room door closed behind her, cutting Vivian off from the hushed discussions and lofty promises. She strode down the silent corridor, her heartbeat pounding, not with anger, but with the fierce vitality of reclaiming her right to be heard. At the reception area, she slowed, her gaze landing on Melissa Stone, the architect of icy indifference. Melissa sat rigid, her hands clenched, knuckles white, her usual confidence replaced by a flicker of shame. Their eyes met for a brief moment before Melissa's darted away, her mask of indifference shattered. No greeting escaped her lips, only the silence of someone confronted with the consequences of her actions. Did she feel the weight of her role? Did she see the barriers she'd helped build? Vivian said nothing, holding her calm gaze, neither accusing nor forgiving. But knowing change begins when those who've stood outside fairness dare to reflect. Sometimes, a single look is enough to expose the cost of upholding exclusion. She exited the bank, passing through the automatic glass doors, leaving behind the marble and yellow lighting. Outside, the Texas sun blazed, its rays scorching the pavement, burning away the morning's cold. Vivian no longer felt small or out of place. Her steps on the sidewalk were steady, strong, as if Houston itself had opened to welcome someone reborn by her quest for justice. Under a street tree's shade, she paused, inhaling deeply, the hot asphalt, exhaust fumes, and warm breeze mingling into a freedom no money could buy. Was this what victory felt like? Was this the taste of dignity reclaimed? Her phone chimed, breaking the moment. Vivian checked the screen, an email from Highland Crest Bank. Congratulations, your loan application has been approved. Please check your mailbox for further instructions. She smiled, not just for the approval, but for what it represented. A triumph of dignity, self-respect, and the hope of awakening a system that once thought itself untouchable. This was more than a financial win. It was a victory for every voice dismissed, every client made to wait, every person told they didn't belong. Vivian Carter had spoken, and Highland Crest would never be the same. Could this be the start of a new era? Could her courage inspire others to demand their place? The Houston sun blazed high, its golden rays spilling across the bustling sidewalk, glinting off the towering glass walls of Highland Crest Bank, where just hours ago Vivian Carter had fought a quiet, fierce battle against a system that tried to render her invisible. One woman's courage had forced an institution to pause, reflect, and change, not just for her, but for countless others who'd endured the sting of silent exclusion. Why should anyone have to wait to be seen? Why should respect be a privilege for some and a struggle for others? Vivian slipped her phone into her pocket, the weight of the bank's email. Congratulations, your loan application has been approved, settling like a badge of honor. She lifted her chin, stepping into the sunlit street with a newfound lightness, her heart swelling with pride and purpose. Across the way, a group of students laughed, their voices bright as they headed home from class, while a delivery driver paused by his truck, wiping sweat from his brow. None knew the war she'd waged inside those marble walls, but Vivian did, and she carried a quiet faith that from this day forward, every one of them could hold a little more hope that they, too, could demand to be seen for who they truly are. Wasn't that the real victory? Wasn't that the spark of change? Beneath the relentless Texas sun, Vivian walked on, her steps buoyant, carrying not just a signed loan, but a healed scar deep in her soul, a conviction that burned brighter than ever. Sometimes, all it takes is one brave voice to rattle a hardened institution, to ensure future generations won't bear the shame of invisibility in a world that boasts progress and civility. As she rounded the corner, her silent yet powerful struggle lingered in every gaze, every gesture, every fading ray of daylight. HT, a vivid reminder of the irreplaceable value of true respect. The late afternoon sun had softened, its golden glow stretching long shadows across the pavement, illuminating the bank's glass facade. Vivian paused, turning back to gaze at the building, no longer an untouchable fortress, but the site of a monumental stand, a place forever marked by her defiance. How could a single morning shift so much? How could one woman's resolve crack open a system's flaws? The slanting light cut through the glass like a spotlight, exposing the shadowy corners where power and old habits of discrimination had festered for too long. Vivian stood still, her shoulders relaxed, her eyes heavy with a mix of pride and deep empathy for the thousands, millions of other Vivian Carters out there, forced to wait in silence simply because they didn't fit some arbitrary ideal. Somewhere right now, countless others are sitting in lobbies, unseen, dismissed because they don't match someone's narrow definition of standard. That thought echoed in her mind, not as a lonely cry, but as a piercing truth about a society that claims fairness yet falters. Why do we let this happen? Why do we accept systems that prioritize some while sidelining others? Vivian closed her eyes for a moment, drawing a deep breath, the warm air filling her lungs with resolve. In that instant, the noise of the morning rushed back. The hurt, the half-hearted excuses, the condescending glances from Melissa Stone, the dismissive shrugs from Marcus Kramer. But those memories no longer had the power to wound her. Instead, they fueled her fire, a blazing reminder that respect isn't a gift handed out by systems or individuals. It's a right you claim through courage, persistence, and an unshakable belief in your worth. A small smile curved her lips as she thought of her mother, her voice a steady guide through years of struggle, and of the generations of women of color who'd climbed steep ladders only to face silent barriers. She thought of the men, women, and children still stranded behind transparent doors that never truly open. Did they know they weren't alone? Did they know their voices could matter? Vivian's heart spoke to them all. Respect isn't something someone gives you. It's yours to claim. If you feel overlooked, pushed aside, speak up. One word, one step, one determined stare can shake a system frozen in its ways. Don't wait for a seat at the table. Stride through those opaque doors and demand your place. And if they try to make you wait, make them remember why they were wrong. Turning away, Vivian left the bank's glass edifice behind, no longer flawless but reshaped by its own reckoning. Inside, processes were being scrutinized, masks had fallen, and an institution had been forced to confront its reflection. Her story wouldn't make headlines or flood social media, but it planted a seed in everyone who witnessed it, from the powerful CEO and board members to the once arrogant receptionist, that true fairness can't survive on silent exceptions and hidden injustices. Could the seed grow? Could it change more than just one bank? Her footsteps joined the rhythm of passers-by, the late sun blazing ahead, its warmth a promise of new beginnings. For Vivian, and for all those forced to wait on the sidelines, a new day had dawned. Wherever injustice festers, there will always be someone brave enough to demand their right to be seen. Vivian's journey was a testament to steadfast courage, a beacon for anyone who's ever felt dismissed for not fitting someone else's mold. Have you ever been overlooked, pushed aside, made to feel less than? What did you do to claim your place? Her story is a call to share your own experiences of fairness and respect in today's world, to spark conversations that matter. If Vivian's courage moved you, pass it on. Share it with friends, spread the word, and keep exploring these vital lessons in dignity, justice, and the power of one voice. Because one voice can change everything. Isn't that worth fighting for? Isn't that the world we want to build? Vivian Carter's story hits me like a thunderbolt, igniting a fire in my soul. Her fierce courage in confronting a system that tried to diminish her speaks to a truth that burns in my heart. Respect isn't a gift. It's a right we must claim with unyielding resolve. The way she stood tall against the cold indifference of Highland Crest Bank, demanding fairness, fills me with awe and hope. How many of us have felt that sting of being overlooked, pushed aside for not fitting some arbitrary mold? It's infuriating, yet Vivian's defiance is a rallying cry. Her journey underscores a lifestyle I passionately believe in, one where we refuse to shrink, where we stride through life with dignity, challenging injustice wherever it festers. Socially, her story exposes the ugly reality of systemic bias, a poison that still seeps into institutions cloaked in polite exclusion. It's maddening that in 2025, people like Vivian, qualified, prepared, must still fight to be seen. But her triumph sparked joy and conviction in me. One voice can shake a system. We need more Vivian Carters, more brave souls to tear down those invisible barriers and demand equality for all, regardless of name or profile. I'm inspired to live boldly, to speak up when I see unfairness, and to foster a world where respect starts at the front door, not after a battle. Vivian's legacy isn't just a lone approval. It's a beacon for justice, a reminder that our worth is non-negotiable. Let's honor her by living with that same fire, by ensuring no one waits in the shadows. Isn't that a life worth fighting for?